Lance. Lance is the founder of Actual Coffee, which is what Rust Belt serves. And I think the title of the talk is The Story of Actual Coffee Pursuing Competence. Is that right?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I'm just going to talk about whatever I want, really. No, what I want to talk about is just kind of my story. I don't think I'm sharing a lot of new ideas, but I'm sharing existing good ideas kind of in my context and how they worked for me. So I'm going to read off of my paper from time to time, so don't judge my public speaking abilities. Really what I want to talk about is taking your idea and doing something with it in the smallest, most basic, most tiny little way that you possibly can. You don't have to invest any money on your business idea if you're going to start a business or if you're trying to enter some sort of career or whatever. Just take that idea and just take the tiniest little step. And what's going to happen is from starting at that tiny little point, you're eventually going to become an expert at what you do. And as an expert, and all that competence that you built, you're going to make way better decisions than if you tried to start with a lot of money or with a huge business plan or whatever, and I'll get into that more. But I started a coffee roasting company. And a lot of people ask me, like, how did you get into coffee? And there's a lot of starting points to that story, but I have to tell you about the first time I had coffee. I was a kid, and my mom she would basically take this little tiny cup, and she would fill it with water, put it in the microwave for like a minute, and then she would take this little red tin, I remember, and she would scoop something out of the tin, and she would stir it in the hot water, and I guess it was called a cappuccino, but it wasn't a cappuccino. It was like this weird gray liquid. Well, anyways, she would take a couple sips, and then she would put it down on the table, and it would sit on the table for the rest of the day. And sometimes, if it was a bad week, I guess, there'd be like multiple cups on the table, like all 70% full. That's what my mom did, you know? She'd just leave the spoon in there. And so, I got curious, like, what is this crap? So I tasted it. And it was terrible. It was like, I guess it was instant coffee with like powdered milk, and it was cold. And I really should have questioned, like, why is she never finishing any of these before I took a sip? Like, that would have been the smart thing to do. But anyways, that was my first coffee experience. It didn't end there. After high school, like, I started going to Starbucks, just so you could look cool and like, yeah, I go to Starbucks, look at me. And I one-upped everyone else who did that, though, because I ordered French presses. Has anyone ever had a French press? All right, cool. You're awesome. Yeah, so at Starbucks, you could order a French press. You could pick whatever coffee you wanted. Like, there's that merchandise wall with like the $40 coffee mugs. You can grab the coffee you want and then just hand it to them and say, like, I want this coffee. And they would make it for you. It was awesome. And so, I don't know, French presses were great. I was having a new coffee experience, much different than the Cafe International Vienna cappuccino that my mom would make. And so I start getting all these coffee questions, though, because I'm comparing like what I'm drinking to what everyone else is drinking, right? Everyone else has a big can, and they scoop it into their Mr. Coffee. There's no Mrs. Coffee, by the way. And it's terrible. It's just like bitter. It's kind of watery. What are they doing? And why did coffee end up in cans in the first place? Like, why is it pre-ground? These are all the questions that are running through my head. But I'm just kind of like sitting on these questions. I'm not really chasing them down. And I eventually buy my own French press, and I got this little German hand grinder. It's like this little piece of wood with a crank on it. And I would take it everywhere. In fact, like, my family get-togethers got to the point where people would call me ahead of time and be like, hey, you're bringing coffee, right, Lance? I'm like, yeah. If I forgot, like, they would be angry with me. My family would literally not like me for a little while because I didn't bring coffee. So after all these great reactions of brewing coffee for friends and family or whatever, like, I started wondering, is this something that I could get involved with in a deeper way? And the answer was yes, but I didn't know how. I mean, the only coffee businesses that I'd really seen were like these groceries on the shelf that, who knows what they really are. And then there's coffee shops. So I started doing some research, like, well, how much does it cost to start a coffee shop, right? It's like $100,000, seriously? I mean, espresso machines are like 20 grand, they're not cheap. And I'm like, I can't do that. I don't have enough money or anything. So I'm just getting frustrated. I'm kind of frustrated with where I am in life. And like I dropped out of college, so I don't really have anything going for me. I was working at a cool startup company, and they were teaching me things about business that I thought was interesting and useful. But I was very dissatisfied. So one day through my little coffee adventure I was on, I read online that you can roast coffee with a hot air popcorn popper. You just have to go to Goodwill or Savers and buy like a little hot air popcorn popper. They're like $3 most of the time. And then you can order your unroasted coffee online, and you can order it from like 20 different countries, and you're out like 20 bucks. I splurged a little bit. I got a new hot air popcorn popper. But yeah, Target actually still sells them if you want to try this. The West Bend Poppery or the Air Poppery 2 or something. They're $19.95. Anyways, so I got the hot air popcorn popper and I roasted some coffee. And you have to wait 12 hours, which is really frustrating before you can drink the coffee. That's what they tell you. Like, well, you got to wait overnight. Like, fine. So anyways, I roasted the coffee, like chaff is flying everywhere. The house is full of smoke. And the next morning I grind the coffee and it smells incredible. So I'm just like getting really excited, you know. I put it in the French press, wait the 4 minutes, push the plunger down, and I pour it in my cup and I drink it. And it's the best coffee I've ever had. I mean, just like $20 later, and I just made something that I couldn't buy anywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere. I've never had anything like it before. It was a completely new experience, and I was blown away. Now, you might just think like, well, you were just excited. You just roasted some coffee, like you were geeking out about it. That's why it was so good. No, it was actually good. It was actual coffee. See what I did there? That's not how the name was formed. It's not a romantic thing like that at all. Anyways, so that was my pivotal moment. Just spending that 20 bucks and doing that thing. And honestly, we all need a moment like that. If you have some sort of idea, you need to find like, what is that tiny little step that you should take? So many people that I talk to have these grandiose business plans, and I think that's great, but I needed $20 to get started. And what that did is that $20 that I spent and that experience that I had was kind of like this success. And I built off of that success, not like a failure. I didn't make coffee that tasted bad and said, well, I got to start over. I got to choose something else. Like, it was awesome. It's very significant. And at that moment that you're doing this thing, like whatever it is, you might think, this is stupid. Why am I wasting my time starting so small? It's not. In fact, that one little step that you might take sets you apart from so many other people. So figure out the lowest common denominator. And one of the things that I did as I was going through this process is I was like really geeked out about coffee, probably because I was caffeinated all the time and I was just always wanting to talk to people about my business ideas. But really the smarter thing to do is just to like stick to the grind, no pun intended, and just do it. So if you find yourself saying, well, no, my business is going to require like $200,000, or my career is going to cost this much money, or whatever it is that you're trying to do, really like go back to the drawing board and start over. Like, what's really the cheapest that you can start at? You can always start smaller. Now, here's a great example. Let's just say for a moment that your dream is to have the monopoly of the frozen corn dog industry. Just think about it. Bear with me for a second. What's the first thing that you should do? If you love the frozen corn dog industry and that's all you think about is just how when you go into a Costco, it's going to be boxes of frozen corn dogs that all say your name on them. That's your future, right? Where should you start? You should make a corn dog and not just microwave someone else's frozen corn dog. No, you got to find, right, get a hot air popcorn popper. No, you need to find a stick. You need to find some weird tube meat, put it on the stick. Find some corn or whatever and, make it. No, that's a joke. But in all seriousness, it's pretty simple, right? These little experiments, they teach us so much. When you do something like make a corn dog, or roast some coffee, you get these questions from your little tiny experiment. And those questions, like, you're really eager to get answered. So what do? You go online. I mean, information is so easy to come by. So you find the answer to your question, and then you're eager to go back and do another experiment, and you make another step, and you get a little further. I mean, this is honestly how my business was formed. So as you keep doing these experiments, you're not even really thinking about it, but you're becoming an expert. So I had to take a lot of steps from hot air popcorn popper. I ended up buying a little bit bigger of a coffee roaster, and then a little bit bigger of one, and they're just these tiny little increments. And with that experience, the years that I just put in experimenting and honing in on roasting coffee in a popcorn popper, I eventually got to the point where I could convince people, and I was confident in saying, like, look, this is something new that I have that I can bring to the area, and everyone loves it. I mean, this is a new kind of coffee for the area. So, you know, I tried to do the loan thing, but as like a young person trying to get money without collateral, without owning a house, without being independently wealthy, or without having rich parents, or without all these things, which is probably most of us, what do, right? Well, I turned to Kickstarter. So in 2013, we had a Kickstarter, and I convinced 264 people that I had a good idea, and they backed my project, and I raised $16,000 in 30 days. It was awesome. I mean, and with that money, and with the competence that I'd built up from all these little experiments, I knew what I needed to do. I found the roaster, I talked to people, I did research, and I bought it, I installed it, and I took more little steps. I mean, it was just easy at the time, right? Because if you're just focused on taking the next step as opposed to like, what's gonna happen 10 years from now, it takes the pressure off of everything. You're not worried about it as much. So one thing I'll say about bootstrapping and just going slow, I mean, it takes a long time. You get on Instagram and you're scrolling down and you see people who are doing it way faster than you, they have way more money than you, they have more Instagram followers than you, or whatever. Don't worry about them. Someone smarter than me put it this way. He said, don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle. And that's just so true. I mean, it's discouraging, honestly. But forget about that, because if you go at your own pace, you're going to end up in a lot better spot. So the last point that I want to make is that being an expert is very valuable. People notice your competence. And recent research has shown that being competent at what you do, let's say your company takes off or your idea takes off and you're in a leadership position, being competent makes you a better leader. There are leaders out there who are tall and loud and charismatic and all those things, and they seem very successful, but if you put a competent leader next to a tall, loud, charismatic leader, like, the team and the business performs better under the competent one. So there's a lot of reasons to be the best at what you do. So starting small, taking these little steps, the Bill Murray, baby steps into the elevator sort of a thing. I mean, it takes the risk out of it. Let's say you're independently wealthy, though. Let's say that you have rich parents, or let's say you convince the right person to give you $100,000. You have the business plan, right? You're gonna execute your plan, your 5-year plan. Like, well, what if it doesn't work out? Or what are you gonna do? Are you gonna hire competent people? Are you just gonna be the boss and try to find people who are gonna just do what you say? Are you gonna find experts? Like, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if that investment tanks? I mean, $100,000 is a lot of money, right? Who are you gonna have to pay that back to? They're gonna come after you. We want our money, I mean, it's not gonna be a good thing, right? So that would be devastating. As an expert, you'll know when it's time to spend that money too. I mean, in my case, I knew when I needed the Kickstarter. It was apparent. I'd gotten to that point where there are no alternatives. So it's not going to be easy, honestly, and I'm not trying to make it sound like starting a business or taking your idea to the next level is just that next little step, but in a lot of ways it could be. You just have to be willing to take that time. So take the time, pay your dues, be an expert, and you'll look back like I just did. We moved into a new spot. We got a bigger coffee roaster just recently, and I closed the lease at my little stinky storefront in downtown Rossford. And I was just like, wow, this is it. I'm leaving this little stink hole. I call it the shanty, the coffee shanty. The roof leaks, the ceiling tile molded, it smelled terrible. But no, you'll look back and you'll just be really impressed. And it'll seem like no time had gone by at all. And then eventually, Nate will ask you to say something at Code City. So that's it. Thank you very much.